The workshop that should have stayed silent. The listing had three warnings: structural instability, unknown energy signatures, previous owner classified. That last one had been what caught Elias Varn's attention. Anything labeled classified was either worthless or priceless. And for someone like him, someone who had already lost everything, either option was acceptable. He stood at the edge of the colony's industrial graveyard, staring at the structure he had just purchased with nearly the last of his credits. It didn't look like opportunities. It looked like a mistake. The workshop leaned slightly to one side, its skeletal frame half buried beneath years of drifting dust and debris. The once smooth metallic exterior had been eaten away by corrosion, leaving jagged scars that caught the pale light of the distant star. Sections of the roof had collapsed inward, creating gaping holes where sunlight poured through like harsh, accusing eyes. Nothing about it said home. Nothing about it said future. But Elias wasn't looking for either. He was looking for a chance. Could be worse, he muttered, though there was no one to hear him. That was the problem, wasn't it? There hadn't been anyone for a long time. The colony itself, if it could still be called that, had once been a hub of activity. Trade routes intersected here. Cargo vessels had come and gone in steady streams, carrying minerals, machinery, and hope between distant systems. Now it was quiet. Too quiet. The automated system still functioned barely, but the people were gone, or rather they had left, one by one, contract by contract, opportunity by opportunity. Until only the desperate remained. People like Elias. He adjusted the strap of his worn toolkit across his shoulder and started toward the workshop. Each step crunched against layers of dust and shattered composite. The air carried a faint metallic tang mixed with something older, something that didn't belong to human construction. Alien. That word had been buried deep in the listing, almost as an afterthought. Non-standard architecture detected, origin unknown. Most buyers would have walked away. Elias had leaned closer. Because alien meant advanced. And advanced meant valuable. If anything in that ruin still worked, even partially, it could be salvaged, repurposed, sold. It could be his way back. Not to what he had been, but to something better than what he was now. The main entrance loomed ahead, half covered by a collapsed support beam. The door itself was intact. That alone was strange. Everything else had suffered. Everything else had broken. But the door looked almost untouched. Smooth, seamless, dark. Elias slowed as he approached, his instincts prickling. All right, let's see what you're hiding. He reached out, brushing away a layer of dust with the back of his hand. The surface beneath was cool. Too cool. Not just from the environment, but from within. There was power here. Still running. After all this time. You shouldn't be active, he murmured. He crouched beside the access panel, prying open the outer casing with a practiced motion. The metal resisted at first, then gave way with a sharp crack, exposing the internal components. Or at least, what passed for components? Elias frowned. That's not wiring. There were no recognizable circuits. No standard connectors. Instead, the interior was composed of flowing, interwoven strands that pulsed faintly with soft light. They shifted subtly as he observed them, like living veins responding to his presence. Okay, he said slowly. That's new. He leaned closer. The strands reacted. Not dramatically. Just enough to confirm what he was beginning to suspect. They're reading me. His biosignature. His proximity. Maybe even his intent. Elias felt a small, familiar thrill stir in his chest. The same spark that had once driven him to dismantle complex systems just to understand how they worked. Adaptive architecture, he whispered. Or something close to it. He wiped his hands on his worn jacket and leaned back slightly, considering. All right, if you're reading me, then let's give you something to read. He placed his hand flat against the panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the strands brightened. Flowed. Reconfigured. Symbols flickered into existence across the surface. Not humans. Not even close. But structured. Ordered. Meaningful. Elias tilted his head, studying the patterns. Language, he said quietly. Or an interface pretending to be one. The symbols shifted again, slower this time. Simpler. Responding. Adapting. You're trying to communicate. A slow smile spread across his face. Well, I can work with that. It took him nearly 20 minutes to figure out the basics. Not because the system was complex, but because it was different. It didn't respond to commands. It responded to understanding. Trial and error didn't work. Guessing didn't work. But observation, patience, those worked. Every time Elias focused on a specific symbol, tried to interpret its meaning, the system adjusted, refining the display. Simplifying, guiding, it wasn't giving him answers. It was teaching him how to ask the right questions. You're not a lock, he murmured. You're a conversation. The panel pulsed softly, as if in agreement. Elias exhaled slowly. All right then. He focused on a cluster of symbols that seemed to repeat. Entry, access, permission. He didn't know the exact translation, but he understood the intent. Access requested, he said aloud, not because the system needed it, but because it helped him think. The symbols shifted, paused. Then, the door unlocked. The sound was almost polite. A soft hiss. A gentle separation of unseen mechanisms. The massive door slid inward with effortless precision, revealing darkness beyond. Elias didn't move at first. He had learned over the years that the moment after a door opens was often the most dangerous. Traps, environmental hazards, unstable systems. Any number of things could be waiting on the other side. He pulled a small scanner from his toolkit, activating it with a flick of his thumb. The device hummed softly, projecting a faint field of analysis into the space beyond the threshold. Readings scrolled across the small display. Atmosphere stable. Temperature controlled. Radiation negligible. Well, Elias said after a moment. That's promising. He clipped the scanner back onto his belt and stepped inside. The air changed immediately. Outside, the colony had been dry, stale, lifeless. Inside the air felt preserved. Cool, clean, almost sterile. Elias paused just beyond the threshold, letting his eyes adjust to the dim lighting. Then, the workshop responded. Panels along the walls flickered to life, casting a soft, even glow across the interior. Not bright, just enough, as if it were aware of exactly what he needed. You've been waiting, he murmured. The space was larger than he had expected. Much larger. From the outside, the workshop looked modest, barely worth the land it occupied. Inside, it extended. Downward, outward, layers of structure hidden beneath the surface. Rows of machinery lined the walls, each unit distinct, each design unfamiliar. Some were dormant, their surfaces coated in a fine layer of dust. Others hummed quietly, their internal systems still functioning after what must have been years, decades, perhaps, of abandonment. Elias moved slowly, his gaze sweeping across every surface. Not a scrapyard, he said softly. A facility. And not just any facility. This place had purpose. Focus. Everything was arranged with intention. Stations connected to one another in a logical flow. Processes designed to move from one stage to the next. Manufacturing, he wondered aloud. But something about that felt wrong. There were no storage units. No shipping interfaces. No signs of mass production. Whatever this place had been used for, it hadn't been about quantities. It had been about precision. About care. He moved deeper into the workshop, drawn toward a faint glow at the center of the space. The closer he got, the more the environment seemed to react. Lights brightened slightly. Displays flickered to life. Systems that had been dormant stirred, as if awakening from a long, patient sleep. You really were waiting, Elias said. For who? The glow intensified. And then he saw it. At the center of the workshop stood a circular platform raised slightly above the surrounding floor. Its surface was smooth, seamless, composed of interlocking segments that fit together with perfect precision. And at its core, a soft, pulsing light. Elias slowed, his breath catching slightly. That's not decorative. He stepped onto the platform. The moment his weight settled, the light brightened. The entire structure responded. A low hum vibrated through the floor, deep and resonant, like the slow heartbeat of something vast and ancient. Elias froze. I didn't touch anything. The platform didn't care. It had already decided. The segments began to move. Slowly, deliberately, separating along invisible seams that appeared only as they shifted. Elias stepped back instinctively, his hand hovering near the tools at his belt. What are you? The platform opened. Not violently, not dramatically, just calmly, as if this was exactly what it had been waiting to do. A chamber lay beneath. Dark, cold, sealed. Until now, a faint mist spilled upward as the seal broke, carrying with it air that hadn't been exposed to the outside world in a very, very long time. Elias swallowed. A preservation system. His voice felt small in the vast, quiet space. He stepped closer to the edge of the opening, peering down into the chamber. At first, he didn't understand what he was seeing. Shapes, smooth, curved, too symmetrical to be natural, too organic to be artificial. Then the light shifted, and everything became clear. There were two of them, resting side by side within the chamber. Large, oval, each nearly the size of his torso. Their surfaces were translucent, not fully but enough that he could see movement beneath. Patterns of light, flowing, pulsing, alive. Elias didn't breathe. Couldn't. No, he whispered. Because it was impossible. Because it didn't make sense. Because things like this didn't just sit in abandoned workshops on forgotten colonies. And yet, there they were. Two eggs. Alien, ancient, and very, very much alive. His first instinct was to step back. To leave. To report what he had found to the authorities, such as they were, and let someone else handle it. That would have been the smart thing to do. The safe thing. The responsible thing. But Elias Varn had never been particularly good at doing what was expected of him. He crouched at the edge of the chamber, his eyes locked on the eggs. They're not dead, he murmured. They're waitings. For what? For who? The workshop hummed softly around him, as if answering a question he hadn't yet asked. He glanced at the surrounding systems. Incubation, he said slowly. Temperature control, energy regulation, environmental stability. This wasn't storage. This was care. Someone had built this place to protect them. To ensure they survived. Even in the absence of their creators. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. How long have you been here? He whispered. Years. Decades. Centuries. Waiting. Alone. He reached out. Then stopped himself. Unknown organism, he said aloud, forcing logic into his thoughts. Unknown risks. He had no idea what they were. No idea what they would become. No idea what might happen if they hatched. His hand hovered in the air, inches from the nearest shell. But if I leave, he said quietly, they stay alone. The thought settled heavily in his mind. And somehow, that felt worse than the risk. The first crack came without warning. A sharp, crystalline sound that echoed through the workshop like a gunshot in the silence. Elias jerked back, his heart leaping into his throat. That was not me. He stared down at the eggs. The left one had changed. A thin line had appeared across its surface, a fracture that glowed faintly from within. Though Elias breathed. Oh no. Or maybes. Oh yes. The second crack followed almost immediately. Then another. The shell trembled. Light spilled through the growing fractures, casting shifting patterns across the chamber walls. The workshop reacted. Systems surged into life. Lights brightened. Displays filled with rapidly shifting symbols. Temperature rose. Energy levels spiked. The entire facility was waking up. "You're hatching," Ilias whispered. And he wasn't ready. He didn't know what to do. Didn't know what they needed. Didn't know if he could help. But he was here. And that would have to be enough. A sound emerged from within the first egg. Soft, weak, a tiny, fragile chirp. Ilias froze. Every instinct in his body sharpened. "Hey," he said, his voice dropping instinctively. "It's okay." The words felt ridiculous, pointless, and yet, he couldn't not say them. "I'm here." Another chirp answered him. This one slightly stronger. From the second egg. Two voices. Two lives. Calling out into a world that had forgotten them. And somehow, they had found him. The shell split. Not cleanly. Not neatly. It cracked open under pressure from within, jagged edges pulling apart as something small and desperate forced its way into the light. A claw emerged first. Tiny, delicate, followed by a second. Then, a head. Ilias inhaled sharply. "You're real." The creature blinked, its eyes still clouded, its movements unsteady. Its scales shimmered faintly, catching the light in hues that shifted between silver and blue. And as it took its first breath, the workshop seemed to breathe with it. Alive, at last. And Ilias Varnes, a man who had come here with nothing, realized in that moment that he was no longer alone. The first bond, the first hatchling did not rise. It fell. The moment its small, fragile body broke free of the shell, gravity claimed it. Its limbs trembled, wings limp and unformed, scales still slick with the translucent fluid that clung to its body. Its chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven motions, each breath a struggle. Ilias Varn moved before thought could catch him. He dropped to his knees beside the open chamber, hands hovering for only a fraction of a second before instinct took over. "I've got you," he murmured. His voice softened without effort, without intention. It simply happened. Because the creature in front of him wasn't dangerous. It wasn't alien in the way he had feared. It was small, weak, and very, very close to dying. His hands slid beneath the hatchling carefully, supporting its body as he lifted it from the fractured shell. It was warmer than he expected. No, hot. Not painfully so, but unnaturally warm, like holding something that burned with its own internal fire. The hatchling made a faint sound as he moved it, a soft, broken chirp that trembled with effort. "Azy," Ilias whispered, "Azy." He didn't know if it could understand him. Didn't know if it even registered his presence. But it responded. Its small body shifted slightly, pressing closer into his hands as if seeking stability, seeking something solid in a world that had suddenly become too large, too bright, too much. Ilias swallowed. "You're not ready." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Because he could see it. The uneven glow beneath its scales flickered erratically, bright one moment, dim the next. Its heartbeat fluttered against his palm, fast and unstable. Something was wrong. Behind him, the second egg cracked open with a sharper, more forceful sound. Ilias turned his head just as the shell split apart in a spray of glowing fragments. This hatchling did not fall. It pushed. A small clawed limb burst through the opening, followed by a head that snapped upward with surprising strength. Its eyes opened almost immediately, bright, focused, and far more aware than its sibling. And then, it cried out. A sharp, demanding chirp that echoed through the chamber with surprising intensity. Ilias blinked. "Wells," he muttered. "You're definitely alive." The second hatchling hauled itself free of the shell, its movements clumsy but determined. It shook its head once, scattering fluid across the platform, then fixed its gaze directly on him. Not wandering. Not confused. Focused. Ilias felt that look settle on him like weight. "You say me." The hatchling chirped again. Louder this time. Insistent. Demanding. Elias exhaled slowly. And you want something. The workshop came alive around them. Not subtly, not gradually. The systems surged with purpose. Panels along the walls illuminated in cascading sequences, displaying shifting patterns of alien symbols that pulsed with urgency. The air itself seemed to hum with energy, as if the entire facility had been waiting for this moment, for this precise set of conditions. Elias glanced around, his mind racing. Okay, this is what you were built for. This wasn't random activation. This was procedure. A system designed to respond to hatching. To guide. To assist. To ensure survival. Show me, he said, stepping toward the nearest display. The symbols shifted. Not randomly. Not chaotically. They slowed. Simplified. Adjusted. Responding to his focus. Teaching him how to read them. Elias leaned closer, his brow furrowing. Biological data. He could see patterns now. Structures. Energy flows. Diagrams that resembled anatomy, but not human anatomy, something more complex, something built around a core of energy rather than simple organic function. These aren't just animals, he murmured. They're something else. The display shifted again, highlighting a section. Nutrient intake. Energy stabilization. Environmental requirements. Elias followed the sequence with growing understanding. You're telling me how to keep them alive. The stronger hatchling chirped again, louder this time. Elias turned back just in time to see it stumble forward, its small claws scraping against the smooth surface of the platform as it moved toward him. Toward the weaker ones. Toward the one he still held. You know, Elias said softly. The hatchling reached him and stopped, its head tilting slightly as it examined its sibling. Then it chirped. Not sharp this time. Not demanding. Softer. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. You're worried. The hatchling nudged the weaker one gently with its snout. The smaller creature barely responded. Its glow flickered again. Fainter this time. Elias' stomach dropped. Not good, he whispered. He turned back to the display. Come on, there's got to be something for this. The symbols shifted rapidly, responding to his urgency. Then, they stopped. One section expanded. Highlighted. Elias land ends. Energy deficit. He frowned. External support required. His gaze flicked back to the hatchling in his arms. You're running out. The display changed again, showing a diagram. A connection. Energy flowing from an external source into the hatchling's core. Stabilizing it. Elias felt his pulse quicken. The external source. The workshop itself pulsed. Energy surged through the floor, the walls, the very air around him. He glanced down at the platform. For me. He hesitated. Not because he didn't want to help, but because he didn't understand the cost. Unknown system. Unknown biologies. Unknown consequences. This wasn't just flipping a switch. This was interaction. Direct. Unfiltered. With something he didn't fully comprehend. Elias closed his eyes for a brief moment. You're going to die if I don't. The words settled the argument. He exhaled slowly. All right. He shifted his grip, supporting the hatchling with one arm as he placed his free hand gently against its side. Its scales were soft. Warm. Alive. I don't know how this works, he whispered. But you're not dying here. The response was immediate. The moment his skin made contact, the workshop reacted. The platform beneath him pulsed with light, its energy output surging as if triggered by his intent. And then, it flowed. Not from the platform. Not from the walls. From him. Elias gasped. His muscles tensed as a strange pulling sensation spread through his arm, like something was drawing heat, strength, something deeper from within him. Oh wait. His instinct screamed at him to pull away. To break contact. To stop whatever was happening. But he didn't. Because the hatchling's glow strengthened, its flickering light steadied, brightening as the energy flowed into it. Its breathing slowed, evened out. The fragile, erratic rhythm of its heartbeat began to stabilize beneath his hand. It's working, Ilya's breathed. Relief washed through him, sharp and overwhelming. It's actually working. The pull intensified for a moment, stronger, deeper, before gradually easing. The hatchling shifted slightly, its small head turning toward him. And then, it pressed against his hand. Not weakly, not desperately, but deliberately. Trusting, Ilya's chest tightened. Hey, he murmured. I've got you. The connection faded slowly. Not abruptly, not violently, just naturally, like a completed circuit. Ilias pulled his hand back carefully, his arm tingling with residual energy. He flexed his fingers. That was new. He didn't feel weaker. Not significantly. But he felt different. As if something had passed between them. Not just energy. Something more. He looked down at the hatchling. Its glow was steady now. Soft. Even. Alive. You're going to be okay, he said quietly. The stronger hatchling chirped again. Ilias looked up just in time to see it staring at him, its eyes bright, focused, and filled with something that looked suspiciously like expectation. Oh, don't tell me, he said. The hatchling took a step forward. Then another. Then it opened its mouth. And chirped. Loudly. Demandingly. Ilias stared at it. You're hungry. The hatchling chirped again. Even louder. Ilias let out a small, incredulous laugh. Yeah, I figured. He turned back to the display. All right, what do you eat? The workshop responded instantly. The display shifted, pulling up a new set of diagrams. Nutritional requirements. Energy compounds. Storage units. A section of the far wall illuminated, a previously hidden compartment sliding open with a soft hiss. Inside, containers. Sealed. Preserved. Ilias walked over slowly, his eyes scanning the contents. Pre-prepared nutrients, he murmured. Of course. Whoever had built this place had planned for everything. Including this moment. Including him. Or someone like me. He selected one of the containers, examining it carefully. The material was unfamiliar, but the interface was simple enough, responsive to touch, adapting as he interacted with it. All right, let's not poison you. Feeding the hatchling was messy. The stronger one didn't hesitate. The moment Ilias offered the nutrient compound, it lunged forward, snapping it up with surprising speed. Hey, easy, Ilias laughed, pulling his hand back just in time to avoid losing a finger. The hatchling chirped triumphantly, swallowing the compound before immediately demanding more. You're going to be a problem, Ilias said dryly. The hatchling chirped again. Unapologetic. The weaker hatchling was different. It didn't lunge. Didn't demand. It barely responded. Ilias knelt beside it, holding the nutrient compound close to its mouth. Come on, he murmured. You need this. The hatchling's eyes flickered open slightly. Clouded. Unfocused. It made a faint sound but didn't move. Ilias frowned. Not good. He glanced back at the display. The symbols shifted again. Guiding him. Adjusting. Assisted feeding, he read. Of course. It took time. Patience. Care. Ilias worked slowly, carefully guiding the nutrient into the hatchling's mouth, ensuring it didn't choke, didn't reject it. Easy, he whispered. You're doing fine. The hatchling responded weakly, swallowing in small, uneven motions. But it was enough. It was something. And slowly, its glow brightened. Hours passed. Ilias didn't notice. Didn't care. The outside world faded into nothing. There was only the workshop, the hatchlings, and the fragile growing understanding of what he had taken on. He moved between the displays and the platform, learning, adapting, responding to the constant stream of information the workshop provided. Temperature adjustments, energy regulation, nutritional balance. Every system worked with him, guided him, as if it had always been meant to. "You were waiting," he said at one point, leaning against the central console, "for someone to do this. Not for a specific species. Not for a specific individual. Just someone willing to try." By the time the artificial lighting shifted to simulate night, Elias was exhausted. His body ached. His mind was overwhelmed. But he couldn't leave. He wouldn't. The hatchlings lay close together on the platform, their small bodies rising and falling in a steady, synchronized rhythm. The stronger one had curled protectively around the weaker, its wings, still too small to truly shield, draped awkwardly over its sibling. Elias watched them in silence. "You're already looking out for each other." The stronger hatchling chirped softly in its sleep. Elias smiled faintly. "Yeah, I guess that makes 3 of us." He settled down beside the platform, his back against the cool metal, his eyes still fixed on the hatchlings. Sleep tugged at him. Heavy, insistent, but he fought it. Just a little longer. Just enough to make sure they were stable. "Safe, alive. I didn't come here for this," he murmured. "I just wanted a place to start over." The words felt distant, irrelevant, because that wasn't what this was anymore. This wasn't a project, wasn't an opportunity, wasn't even survival. This was responsibility. Unexpected, unwanted, and yet, he couldn't imagine walking away. The workshop hummed softly around him. Not mechanical, not cold, but present, aware, as if it too was watching. Waiting, guarding. Elias closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Just to rest. He didn't see the faint pulse of light that spread through the walls. Didn't notice the subtle shift in the systems as they adjusted, not to the hatchlings this time but to something else. Something beyond the workshop. A signal, ancient, dormant, now reactivated, sent into the void, and far beyond the silent colony. Something heard it. Elias slept, unawares, unprepared, and for the first time in a very long time. He wasn't alone. What humanity protects. The signal did not travel like sound. It did not move like light. It did not obey the simple laws Elias Varn had spent his life understanding. It answered something older. Something woven into the fabric of the universe, long before humanity had ever taken its first step beyond its own sky. And it had been silent. For a very, very long time. Until now, Elias woke to silence. Not the quiet of sleep. Not the calm of a controlled environment. But a silence that felt wrong. Too complete. Too heavy. His eyes snapped open. For a moment he didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't think. He just listened. The workshop was still active, the low hum of its systems steady beneath everything, but something had changed. Something subtle. Something he couldn't immediately identify. "What is it?" he murmured, pushing himself up from where he had fallen asleep against the platform. His muscles protested, stiff from hours of tension, but he ignored it. Because the feeling didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger. He turned toward the hatchlings. They were awake. Both of them. The stronger one stood on unsteady legs, its wings twitching slightly as it shifted its weight. Its eyes were bright, alert, focused. Not on him. On the ceiling. The weaker hatchling was still lying down, but its head was raised, its gaze fixed in the same direction. They were listening. Elias frowned. "What do you hear?" The stronger hatchling chirped softly. "Not hungry. Not demanding. Something else. Something closer to recognition." Elias followed their gaze. The ceiling of the workshop was fractured, sections of the structure collapsed inward from years of neglect. Through the gaps, the pale light of the distant star filtered down in uneven beams. Nothing unusual. Nothing new. And yet, the light shifted. Not because of the sun. Because something moved across it. Ilya's stomach dropped. No, he whispered. He stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the opening above. The shadow passed again. Larger this time. Slower. Not drifting. Controlled. That's not debris. A low vibration rolled through the air. Faint. Distant. But growing. Ilya's pulse quickened. That's not the wind either. He moved quickly. Instinct overriding hesitation. Stay here, he said, though he knew the hatchlings wouldn't understand. Or maybe they would. The stronger one chirped sharply, taking a step toward him. Elias paused. I'll be back. The hatchling held his gaze for a moment longer, then settled back beside its sibling. Watching. Waiting. Elias exhaled slowly. Oh, good. The journey to the surface felt longer than it should have. Every step echoed too loudly. Every shadow seemed deeper. The workshop systems flickered subtly as he moved, adjusting, responding, but his focus was elsewhere. Up. Toward whatever had just passed overhead. The main entrance hissed open as he approached, the alien mechanisms responding instantly to his presence. Elias stepped out into the open. And the world had changed. The sky was not empty. It was filled. Shapes moved above the colony, massive, silent, and impossibly precise. They cut through the atmosphere without sound, their forms sleek and angular, their surfaces reflecting the harsh light in ways that made them seem almost unreal. Ships. Not humans. Not even close. Elias stood frozen at the threshold, his breath catching in his throat. I knew it, he whispered. Because of course this wasn't abandoned. Of course something like that workshop, something that preserved life for who knew how long, wouldn't just be forgotten. It had been waiting. And now, so had they. One of the ships descended. Slowly, deliberately. It didn't roar. Didn't burn the air. It simply moved, displacing the atmosphere around it with quiet, overwhelming presence. Elias felt it in his chest, a pressure deep and steady, like standing too close to something that operated on a scale he couldn't fully comprehend. It's okay, he muttered. Stay calm. His hands tightened slightly at his sides. Stay calm. Because panic wouldn't help. Running wouldn't help. And hiding would definitely not help. The ship settled a short distance from the workshop, its form hovering just above the ground. No landing gears. No visible support. Just suspended. Watching. Elias swallowed. You're not here for me, he said quietly. And he believed that. Instinctively. Because whatever these things were, they hadn't come for a failed engineer on a forgotten colony. They had come for something else. Behind him, the workshop hummed. Louder this time. Elias didn't turn. Didn't need to. He knew. They're here for you. The ship opened. Not with a dramatic display. Not with noise or light. A section of its surface simply shifted. Parted. Revealing an opening that hadn't existed a moment before. And from within, something stepped out. Elias had seen aliens before. Trade routes brought all kinds of species together, some similar to humans, others so different they barely seemed biological at all. But this was something else. The figure was tall. Taller than any humans. Its form was armored, not in the crude mechanical way of human design, but in something that looked grown rather than built. Smooth, layered plating covered its body, shifting subtly as it moved. Its face, if it could be called that, was partially obscured. Not hidden, but abstract. Features that suggested structure without conforming to anything familiar. And its eyes were not eyes. They were light, focused, unblinking, locked onto him. Elias felt very, very small. The figure approached slowly. Not threatening, not aggressive, but deliberate. Each step measured. each movement controlled. Elias forced himself to stand his ground. Hi, he said, because apparently that was what his brain decided was appropriate. The figure stopped a few meters away. Silence stretched between them. Heavy, waiting. Then, it spoke. Caretaker. The voice was wrong. Not in the sense of being hostile, but in the sense of being translated. Each word carried a slight delay, as if being interpreted in real time, adjusted to match his understanding. Elias blinked. That's me, I guess. The figure tilted its head slightly. You activated the hatchery. Elias hesitated. I opened a door, he said. They were already theirs. A pause. Then, yet you remained. Elias let out a small breath. Yeah. He didn't elaborate. Didn't explain. Because he wasn't sure he could. The figure studied him. Not just looking. Analyzing. Evaluating. Elias could feel it, like standing under a spotlight that saw more than just the surface. The hatchlings live, the figure said. It wasn't a question. They do. The weaker one was failing. Elias stiffened slightly. It was. It no longer is. Elias held its gaze. No. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, explain. Elias blinked. Explain. Your actions. Elias exhaled slowly. I didn't have a plan, he said. I saw something dying and I helped. The figure didn't move. Didn't react. Why? Elias frowned. What do you mean, why? The hatchlings are not your species. I noticed. They are not your responsibility. Elias let out a short, humorless laugh. Yeah, well, they didn't seem to know that. Silence. Explain, the figure repeated. Elias ran a hand through his hair, frustration flickering beneath the surface. Because they were alone, he said. Because they were going to die. Because I was there. He met the figure's gaze. Is that not enough? The silence that followed was different. Not empty. Not neutral. But considering. The figure's head tilted slightly again, its gaze shifting, not away but through him, as if comparing what he had said against something deeper. Something older. Then, you formed a bond. Elias frowned. They what? The hatchlings respond to you. Elias hesitated. They respond to anyone who feeds them, he said. Incorrect. The word was flat. Certain. They chose you. Elias' chest tightened slightly. And chose. Behind him, something moved. A soft sound. A familiar chirp. Elias turned. The hatchling stood at the entrance of the workshop. Watching. The stronger one stepped forward, its small form more stable now, its movements more confident. The weaker one followed slower but no longer struggling. Elias' breath caught. You shouldn't be out here. The stronger hatchling chirped. Then it moved. Straight toward him. Elias knelt instinctively, his hand reaching out as the hatchling approached. Hey, he murmured. The hatchling pressed against his leg, its warmth seeping through the fabric of his clothes. The weaker one reached him moments later, nudging gently against his hand. Elias smiled faintly. Yes, I'm here. The alien figure watched. Silently. Then, slowly, it lowered itself. Not fully, but enough. A gesture. Deliberate. Meaningful. Elias froze. What are you doing? Acknowledgement, the figure said. Of what? The figure's gaze shifted between him and the hatchlings. They have chosen. Elias shook his head slightly. They're animals. They are not. The words carried weight. They are carriers of the flame. Elias blinked. The what? Life memory continuities. The figure straightened. For centuries, they have not bonded with your kind. Elias' mind struggled to keep up. Your kind. Humans. Elias swallowed. And now, The figure met his gaze. Now they have. Elias looked down at the hatchlings. The stronger one chirped softly, its eyes bright. The weaker one leaned into his hand. Trusting, unquestioning, Elias felt something shift in his chest. I didn't do anything special, he said quietly. You stayed, the figure replied. That is rare. The other ships remained in the sky. Watching, waiting, but they did not move closer. They did not interfere. As if this moment, this decision, belonged to something else. The figure stepped back. They are yours. Elias froze. Excuse me. To protect, to raise, to stand beside. Elias shook his head, a half-laugh escaping him. No, that's not how this works. Oh, it is. I don't even know what they are. You will learn. I don't know how to take care of them. You already have. Elias stared at the figure. This is insane. This is chosen. Silence stretched between them. The weight of the moment settling slowly, inevitably, into something real. Something irreversible. Elias looked down at the hatchlings again. At their small forms. Their steady breathing. Their quiet trust. If I say no, he asked. The figure was silent for a long moment. Then, you will not. Elias let out a breath. You're very confident. We have observed your kind. A pause. You protect what is fragile. Elias huffed softly. Not always. Often enough. He closed his eyes for a moment. Just a moment. Because he already knew the answer. Had known it from the second he reached into that chamber. From the second he chose to stay. Yeah, he said quietly. As I will. The figure inclined its head. Then it is accepted. The ships began to rise. One by one. Silent, effortless, returning to the sky from which they had come. Elias watched them, his heart still racing, his mind struggling to process everything that had just happened. That's it, he called out. The figure paused at the edge of the ship's opening. We will watch, it said. From afar. Why? The figure looked back at him. Because you are no longer alone. Then it was gone. The ship closed. And the sky emptied. Elias stood there for a long moment. The wind brushing softly against his face. The colony stretching out around him as silent and forgotten as ever. But it didn't feel the same anymore. Nothing did. He looked down. The hatchlings looked back. The stronger one chirped. The weaker one leaned closer. Elias let out a long, slow breath. All right, he said. I guess we're doing this. Behind him, the workshop hummed. Alive, awake, no longer waitings. And somewhere far beyond the stars, something ancient watched. Not with judgment, not with fear, but with something new. Something humanity had earned. Not through powers, not through knowledge, but through a simple, stubborn choice. To protect. Because sometimes, that was enough to change everything.